The journey to modernize the mining sector in Rwanda has got to be looked at in the context of where we have come from and where we are today, as well as where we are heading.
The government has done what is possible in making sure that there's infrastructure, roads reaching every mine.
We all know it's changing quite a lot in the last 2-3 years, which I think is it's a very good thing. I think the Rwanda Mining Board is doing very well, or trying very well to professionalize the sector, to try and attract the people with professional skill and with finances skill.
Twebwe twaje tuzi icyo dushaka ubucukuzi burambye kandi burimo n'ikoranabuhanga, niyo mpamvu ibi byose turi kubigeraho.
So now we are providing opportunities for companies that want to go into different types of processing.
So what we are getting in the end of that process is much higher quality than is expecting by the LME. So our team is very pure, and the quality is very high.
Target is to showcase Rwanda as a hub for mining services, mining operations, not only in our region, but wider to the wider region of Africa.
We still have a long way to go, but we have a vision of where we want to go.
Welcome everyone to the Africa Mining Forum digital event. I'm not gonna lie, what a year. But what a journey so far that took us from Kigali last year to our screens today. Despite incredible challenges, remote working, lack of face-to-face engagement, we found that the mining community remained connected and willing to go through the same storm despite being in different boats. What did we learn? Juniors and investor collaboration will be the backbone of a sustainable mining industry in Africa. We've started our digital journey with AMF in August by launching the Africa Mining Tour. Since then, we've connected with thousands of new stakeholders, looking at the continent's endless opportunities and investment potential in strategic commodities. We had the chance to get the insight of key CEOs all over the globe that strongly believe in the investment in Operation Africa, and who will remain committed to it despite the constraint that the pandemic has brought into the value chain. You can catch up with all of them in our AMF TV tab. Our mining tour has now reached its final destination, and for the next 5 days, we'll be welcoming over 1,500 international and regional mining stakeholders and 50 incredible speakers that will give you a taste of the experience and outlook of the junior mining sector in Africa for today and tomorrow. Many of you would have attended numerous online platforms, event, webinar, discussion, podcast, you name it. Our industry has been shaken in the last 10 months, and this is right now our only way to remain engaged with you and providing you endless content and networking opportunity from a chat to a Zoom call. Yes, another one. During the next 5 days, we'll be looking into strategic themes that we have come across in the last 12 months and that will drive the sector going forward. From COVID-19 recovery plan to an insight into Australia and Africa connection, we will travel across the continent to understand the mineralization potential of West Africa beyond gold, the future of beneficiation and processing, the importance and requirement of ESG into the investment making, as well as the key to raise capital for juniors. As you all know, running a mine and an operation requires insane amount of infrastructure and power. This will be at the center of our discussion, and we welcome our sister partner, Africa Energy Forum, into it. The next 5 days will dissect the entire value chain for juniors to be successful in Africa, and you will hear a lot about blockchain, transparency, investment attractiveness. So, either I said too much, or not enough. But you can find all of this in the platform we've put together with Swapcard for you today. Navigate through the platform, through the different features, book your session now to make sure you don't miss any reminders and insights that could be valuable for your business through the program tab. When it comes to matchmaking, because it's not all about content, we engage you to navigate your way through the platform by making sure that you have identified valuable new leads. From the homepage on Swapcard, you can just select the attendee page, and the filter box on the left side of your screen will give you the opportunity to narrow down your research. Next, we'd love to hear from you during all the discussion that you will attend. If you have a question for our speakers, please feel free to send it through the chat box made available for each session. We'll try to answer every question during the next 5 days, but if we don't get to yours, don't worry, we'll make sure that you follow up afterwards. And lastly, we really encourage you to share your insights and thoughts with all your social network using the hashtag Africa Mining Forum. Now, without further ado, I would like to leave the floor to our incredible keynote panel. The opening will be moderated by Sheila Kama. Sheila Kama is a non-executive director, an independent consultant, and a mineral, oil and gas policy advisor with more than 2 decades of work experience. Sheila is a former executive of Anglo-American Corporation and De Beers Group in Botswana. She has extensive knowledge of the mining industry, the Africa business environment, and sustainability challenge in minerals, oil and gas industries. Sheila will be sharing our session today and drive an exciting discussion with Honorable Francis Gattare, CEO for Rwanda Mines Petroleum and Gas Board, Emma Wade-Smith, OBE, a Majesty Trade Commissioner for Africa at the UK Department of Trade, and finally, Hubert Denzo, CEO and Vice Chairman at Africa Investor. Now, enjoy the session, get the most of the next 5 days, and especially share it to your network in one click. Thank you.
Good afternoon and good morning, everyone, wherever in the world you are. Today's panelists are 3 very esteemed speakers. In the first instance, let me introduce myself as the moderator. My name is Sheila Kama. I'm a retired executive of the mining industry, having worked for both De Beers and Anglo-American and the World Bank and the African Development Bank. I live here in Botswana, and so to say that mining is in my blood would be an understatement. Be that as it may, it's my pleasure to introduce today's subject, which is the next smart move. COVID-19 recovery plan to stimulate investment into mining exploration in Africa. And to help us understand that challenge, today we have Honorable Francis Gattare from Rwanda, and we have Emma Wade-Smith from the United Kingdom, otherwise based in South Africa, representing Her Majesty's government there. And then we have Hubert Denzo, who is the CEO of Invest Africa. And so with those few words, may I ask with you, start with you, Honorable Gattare, and ask you to please say a few words.
Thank you very much, Sheila, for your kind introduction. Distinguished delegates, on behalf of the Rwanda Mines Petroleum and Gas Board, and on behalf of the government of Rwanda, I'd like to welcome you to the 2nd annual Africa Mining Forum. This level of, the level of attendance and engagement of the delegates attending last year in Kigali showed us that there was a need to scale up convening this forum and even to extend it to the continental level, hence changing it from the East and Central Africa Mining Forum to the Africa Mining Forum this year. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have leveraged to use modern technologies to convene online, but every challenge comes with a silver lining. So let's embrace this chance to connect with more companies and individuals at a significantly reduced cost and time normally associated with international travel. The last year edition, held in Kigali, has opened our eyes to the potential business partnerships we can realize in our countries, and as the host of this forum, co-host of this forum, we promise that this edition will be more rewarding. The 2nd edition of the Africa Mining Forum is going to be a premium investment platform showcasing the business opportunities in the mining sector and also discussing ways to keep our heads up despite the effects of the pandemic across the entire value chain. And so this Africa Mining Forum 2020, I hope, will deliver a 5-day interactive session in which there will be content-led activities from more than 12 strategic spotlight sessions with international CEOs, one-on-one sessions, women in mining session, and the ministerial forum. So like many other industries across the world, the mining industry has been affected by the unprecedented force of the COVID-19 pandemic. Fortunately, Rwanda's mining sector has been resilient, and thanks to the stringent safety measures put in place, operators here in Rwanda were quick to safeguard themselves against the virus, which has to date meant that we have not reported a single COVID-19 positive case from the sector. It's for this reason that I hope to welcome you all to visit Rwanda whenever you are able to, but especially look forward to see you in Kigali next year at the 3rd edition of the Africa Mining Forum. So on behalf of everyone at the Rwanda Mines Petroleum and Gas Board, and on behalf of the organizing team of the Africa Mining Forum 2020, I wish you a productive participation at this 5-day digital event and hope you get lasting business relationships from it. I thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Emma, may I come to you, please? Could you say a few words on behalf of the Department of Trade in the UK?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Africa and cover the entire African continent across the full range of trade and investment activities that we have between us. As the Department for International Trade, we are the investment and trade arm of the UK government, and we champion free trade, we tackle market access barriers, we are helping UK companies to export to and invest in Africa, and we're also promoting the UK as a fabulous international destination for African businesses to grow their foreign and international activities. So our trade policy and our market access work, along with our trade and investment promotion work, is all targeted really at achieving one key goal, and that is to increase the trade and investment flows between Africa and the UK. And I'm very passionate about how we persuade buyers all across Africa to think of the UK as their business partner of choice. So when we are looking at what we do, we have a very clear purpose behind our trade and investment work. It's around championing economic growth and job creation and increasing sustainable, inclusive and responsible trade and investment. And just very briefly, at the beginning of this year in London, we had a UK-Africa Investment Summit in which we talked about the importance of supporting African countries to transform their economies, including how we can help to work with Africa to build a cleaner, greener and more resilient growth strategy. And mining, I'll get to the point, mining is absolutely essential to the clean growth strategy. And so I'm really excited to be talking about how we can see mining transition into the future to support that clean growth story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. Just to be clear, you mean Africa or you mean Sub-Saharan Africa?
I mean Africa.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
That's lovely, just to be sure. Thank you for that introduction. May I come back then to you, Hubei, and invite you to say a few words, both about yourself and your company, please. Please unmute.
Yes. Thank you very much, Sheila. My name is Hubert Danso, and I'm the chair of Africa Investor, which is an institutional infrastructure investment platform. And I also chair the African Union's Continental Business Network, the CBN, which is a pension and sovereign wealth fund leaders network of chairmen and CEOs and CIOs of African institutional investors that was established by and to support African heads of state to partner pension and sovereign wealth funds on the continent to drive long-term infrastructure investments. I think for our purposes here, the continent's potential to be a global mining investment haven cannot be disputed when Africa is the home to 90% of the world's platinum supply, 90% of the world's cobalt supply, 50% of the world's gold supply, 35% of the world's uranium, 9.6% of the global oil output, 2/3 of the world's manganese, and 75% of the world's coltan supply. And this is all notwithstanding the fact that today, less than 50% of the continent has been geologically surveyed. And the estimation is that there is at least the same amount of resources that we know today yet to be explored. That being said, Africa only received less than 1/3 of the 3 billion odd global mining exploration investment last year. So ironically, but we're pleased to be here, we recognize and believe that COVID-19 offers a unique opportunity to apply different approaches and public-private partnership models to better attract global as well as domestic shareholders, as well as innovate and assist the continent's mining sector, support Africa's integration and competitiveness in the global fourth industrial revolution. So I'm very much looking forward to participating in this dialogue and sharing some ideas. Thank you, Chair.
That's lovely. You've got us off to a good start there because you hit the nail on the head. So what's the point of having the resources if they are not, first of all, discovered, and secondly, if they are not exploited, and what's the point of exploiting them if they are not doing any good? So that takes me back then to you, Honorable Qatari. Your country has been at the forefront of attempting two things. One, to drive investment in exploration, and two, to channel any projects from mining towards downstream beneficiation. From what we can see from COVID, the world is not the same, and the world is about to change. My question to you is, in this changing world, how do you see your country approaching efforts to attract investment in mining? Has COVID changed your strategy? And if so, how has Rwanda's strategy changed? Over to you.
Thank you, Sheila. COVID-19 has affected everyone in the world, and our region has not been spared. But like the saying goes, for every challenge, there is often a silver lining around it. And for us, we have seen the silver lining around COVID to be associated with the small-scale nature of operations in the mining sector in our country, which we have leveraged while much of the world was shutting down large operations. We have found that our mining sector was very quick and agile to recover when opportunities came up for the lockdown that had initially been put in place when it was lifted. And so three things happened. One was that when the initial 45 days lockdown was lifted here in Rwanda, the mining sector received an opportunity which they seized immediately to put to the international market the required technology methods that they can resume to operate, to mine, to ship, and send to international markets very quickly. And so when the Asian markets, particularly in China, recovered and demand for these technology methods recovered as well. And prices started to increase because some of the large operations around the world were unable to resume operations. Our mining sector leveraged that agility to put the needed materials to the market, and we have continued to do that. The second thing we have done is, I think, Hubert Danso has mentioned it. In the African continent, there is always a constraint for financing exploration activities. We have seen that in the context of COVID, we needed to review some of the incentives in place to attract exploration companies. And so for the first time, the government of Rwanda has put in place a new incentive, which is a 10-year loss carryover incentive for exploration companies to be able to invest their resources in exploration, knowing comfortably that the investments put in place can be recovered through tax incentives over a period of 10 years. We are beginning to see interested companies showing interest in this new incentive. But we have also seen that in the COVID environment, it was very important to diversify, identify new minerals, new materials that are counter-cyclical, especially during the time when most metals are facing a decline in demand and international prices. And so some of our new minerals, especially the gemstones, the precious metals like gold and others, have given us an opportunity to diversify beyond some of the metals that we're relying on previously. Obviously, we also know that with all the international restrictions for travel, particularly in shipping and logistics, we needed to concentrate more in local value addition. And so some of the refineries, smelters, and local processing plants, which were previously operating below capacity, leveraged the COVID international travel restrictions to add scale to what they were doing. And this has given us added opportunities to retain value here in the country. It's the reason why we still feel very strong that the mining sector in Rwanda will begin to carry the heavy lifting of the economic recovery of this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Emma, if I may come to you. You spoke very passionately about the relationship between Her Majesty's government and all of Africa as a trading bloc. And we've had how companies are challenged. I have two brief questions for you. The first is, what has been the response of British companies in Africa to helping the countries and others cope with the effects of the pandemic? The other is, have you observed any change in the way that these companies now do business, a departure, if you wish, from the old traditional business model? Over to you, Emma.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think what we've seen across all sectors and is as visible in mining as elsewhere is this this willingness, this intensity of UK companies to respond to the COVID pandemic in the immediate space and over the longer term as well. So you're very conscientious around how we keep workers safe, how we respond to restrictions and new arrangements that governments have put in place to keep people safe, so social distancing and all that kind of stuff. A big focus around sort of healthcare and hand washing and all of that stuff that we know is so effective actually at keeping people safe. And I think really working to understand how to continue to operate mines, keep mines open while we are facing these extraordinary times. And I think what has been really interesting to see is, of course, for large parts of the world, we've seen the demand for commodities drop as we've seen economic activity being affected. But because we've seen the mining sector sort of go into this situation in quite in a relatively good space, actually, we've seen a lot of activity across the mining sector since the 2015 downturn to really become more efficient, more cost effective, more agile, more flexible. So we are seeing mining companies responding in the moment, as it were, as well as setting themselves up for the long term. And I think, of course, the pandemic has been incredibly tough for many companies, including in the mining sector. And so I think it's driving some of these innovations, these transformations that frankly we have been seeing but need to be accelerated through the mining sector. So looking at how do miners continue to improve their operations, bring in more technology to bear into processes, thinking about how you minimize the environmental impact of a mine in and of itself, as well as thinking about how do you reduce the carbon emissions throughout the lifetime of the mine. And so some of that is consumer driven. So we have seen, for some of the minerals that my panelist was talking about, we've seen consumers wanting to understand where those minerals and commodities are coming from. So traceability, so the use of big data, the use of technology to pursue that. And some of it is investor driven as well. So, following the money in support of this transformation of the investor community as well, in terms of environmental, social and governance standards. So I think that we're sort of seeing the pandemic in the mining sector, as we've seen in many other places, accelerating some of the drive behind transformation and the embracing of technology and innovation.
That is wonderful. Let me come to you then, Hubert. You spoke very passionately about Africa's place in terms of mineral wealth and mineral endowment. But you also recognize that there was a gap between the level of endowment, the level of exploration, and project development. In my experience, the difference is money. It is true that the African people, through their governments, own these resources. But often, because it is others who invest in their development, that ownership is distorted. And that's where you come in, you see. So I'm going to ask you to tell us, how can we protect Africa's capital markets? But more to the point, how can those capital markets become an active source of finance, particularly in the post-COVID era, in bridging this gap between finance coming from the continent and flowing into mining, and with that, protecting that ownership in real terms? Over to you, Hubert. You are in mute.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Absolutely, the capital markets play a critical role on the listed side, and as does private equity on the unlisted side. But I think first and foremost, I think we need to appreciate that the cheapest form of stimulus is confidence, and the ability to provide confidence and clear signals to the investment community is paramount and really very, very important. We believe that there's a great opportunity, as I mentioned in my opening comments, to reset the public-private mining leaders relationship through private sector and presidential mining investment partnerships and collaboration. And we've seen it work effectively at the African Union through the Presidential Infrastructure Champions Initiative, currently chaired by President Cyril Ramaphosa. President Kagame is a member of that. I mean, we as the CBN report into that. It's about 14 heads of state: Ghana, Nigeria, Egypt, Algeria, Kenya, as I mentioned, Rwanda. So we think that type of leadership, there's a real opportunity to have something like that at that level, focused on the mining sector. The African Union has a program with institutional investors called the 5% Agenda, which is a commitment between African heads of state and governments and African pension and sovereign wealth funds to increase their allocations in the region of about 5% of all assets under management to infrastructure and long-term assets. Now, we believe that the mining sector is ripe for participation in that portfolio of opportunity. And we've already seen a very good example from Ghana, where under the leadership of President Nana Akufo-Addo, working closely with the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, GIF, who have now begun to invest in the gold mining sector in the country. And that's really sent a very positive signal to institutional investors. And we can already begin to see this model taking set in other countries on the continent. And as a consequence, the president has gained a great deal of confidence and support as a champion of the mining sector in Ghana and across the continent. But let's remember that fundamentally, capital markets and private equity investments are capital raising venues and instruments whose investments are made through companies and determined on their ability to build up a shareholder base and a share premium in terms of equity. Investment in the sector is very complex and competitive, and it's forensically compared to global peers, not just African opportunities. So let's make no mistake, the investors are harder to find than good projects, and good projects are very hard to find. And if the truth be known, prospective investors are generally a time-consuming distraction if you really go into the belly of the beast and see how the machine works. So we feel that the continent only needs to cultivate a cluster of real catalytic investors to mount a strong, build back better, resilient mining investment COVID-19 response. The reality is it's easier to secure current investors, local producers, to increase and expand their investment than new investors. And it's easier to get new investors with the support of current investors and local producers. So we therefore feel that a compelling COVID-19 mining sector response to attract investment in the mining sector should be in the form of a government partnership with local producers premised on a 4-point plan to optimally increase investment by firstly expanding and working with government and local producers to expand existing mines, to assist the local producers purchase new mines, bringing in new joint venture partners to invest in that growth. And as I think we've heard Minister Kateri also mention, intentionally targeting and attracting a larger percentage of the global exploration spend. As I mentioned, last year in the region of 3 billion, the continent received less than 1 billion of that. I think that there's a very strong and unique opportunity now for governments to work with the local producers and the investment community in partnership to really be able to, as I said, it's easier to expand local relationships. We in the private sector, wherever we're going to invest, whichever sector, the first conversation we're going to have is with the local producers and the local private sector to ask how they're being treated, what the opportunities are for growth, and what the nature and the depth of the relationship is with governments. And I think the countries, like Minister Gatari has already mentioned, he's already seeing fruit because of the leadership delivered through his own ministry, and the president being a very dynamic leader who understands the private sector. They're already seeing fruits. So I really do believe that that partnership is something that should not be underestimated. It should be a very forward-looking partnership. There's a big world out there, and I think that with that partnership and taking account of our blessed endowment that I mentioned in my opening comments, naturally we are well ahead of most competitors around the world. I think we just need to really facilitate that partnership, which will unlock unprecedented levels of capital if it's properly cemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come back to you, Honorable Katari, because what Hube has done is challenged host government to strike a very delicate balance, which is the need to attract finance, but to do it in what he describes as a forward-looking approach, wherein you are thinking globally, but acting locally, if you wish. And my question to you is, in this space where the people of Rwanda quite rightly expect that they benefit from the minerals by striking these balances in ownership, etc., but also in a world in which you have to look outward and attract capital, but also outward to find markets. In Rwanda, how are we striking this balance between protecting national interest while not giving Emma the appearance of undue protectionism? Over to you, sir. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now, sir. Please go ahead.
You can hear me. Okay, very good. Yeah. Thank you very much, Sheila. The
the notion of delicate balance is one that this year, 2020, has come up several times, and that many people now are increasingly becoming familiar with, particularly the delicate balance between health and economic concerns. Obviously, during the COVID-19 circumstances, people have had to prioritize health concerns as number one, because after all, without health, then there is no economics. So the policymakers, as it were, have had to understand what delicate balance means. But in the mining sector, this is a daily phenomenon, because we all know that natural resources are the kind of wealth that all citizens of the country have got ownership claims over. Yet, on the other hand, natural resources require enormous amount of capital for them to be developed and for them to generate any meaningful value to a country. And so there is always a delicate balance between the claim of ownership of these resources as well as the reward to international capital, which is required to develop these resources. And so this debate is very important to take place between communities and governments who represent them, as well as the international capital representatives who also demand many times higher rewards in jurisdictions like ours. So our view is that there has got to be a debate, but there also has got to be an understanding that for every investment, there must be a fair and reasonable reward to it. So in Rwanda, this debate is not new, and we have come to an understanding, a mutual understanding between the investment community as well as the citizens community, that this delicate balance has got to be understood by everyone. What we are seeing as important for us here is that the investment community realizes they are corporate citizens of a country, that they are stakeholders in the development of the communities where they operate, and that they are genuinely mindful of the well-being of the citizens where they operate. Left on their own, they may not be able to realize that. And so there has to be a very strong but fair regulatory framework, which is where we come in. And we believe that we continue to provide a competitive legal and regulatory framework that cares about the well-being of our citizens, but at the same time that recognizes the imperative to incentivize international capital for it to be deployed to harness these natural resources, which otherwise left on their own may not be able to generate the kind of benefits the citizens want. What we know is that even when mineral resources are finished, the citizens will be there and will need to make use of their land. And so it's very important for us that mining sector coexists with other economic benefits that generate the best economic well-being to the citizens, particularly agriculture, but mainly looking after the environment for its long-term sustainability. So our regulatory framework is very strong in ensuring environmental sustainability as well as economic sustainability. And these are the general principles around which the dialogue between the investors, government, and the community has got to take place for continued partnerships in harnessing the natural resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Emma, in the world of mining, we have the large companies, and they are very capable of looking after themselves. But under that big layer of big multinationals, it's a huge number of what are called junior companies. And they are critical because they are typically the front runners for making these discoveries. And many of them find London as their home, where they raise capital to be able to make these discoveries. And I just wondered your view of how, from a policy perspective, can governments, host governments, and governments like the United Kingdom that are interested in driving British firms out into the African frontier, what are the right policies to motivate investment by juniors? And should this be primarily policy driven, or do we see it as primarily left to the market?
Well, look, I think the reason that my department exists, the reason that we have people located across the African continent is precisely to be helping companies to understand the different markets, to understand the different sectors and how those vary across the continent, across the world, but also to work with governments to create the best possible environments for businesses to do what they do best, do business and make some money. And in the UK perspective, I believe doing business in the right way and recognising the importance of ESG and upholding values and principles in the way that we operate. So look, I think that there's a really important role for governments to play here in terms of creating the right policies, supporting the right regulation, enabling the right legislation, but also, as we were just hearing, about making sure that we are creating a transparent, open and inclusive environment within which we can discuss how do we create the right environment to inspire investment, to enable companies to flourish. So I think inevitably companies need to be able to provide a service and a product to the standards that we should expect, and to be able to do so in a way that is very mindful of the impact on local communities, on the environment, and to be a force for good in all of that. But I do think that there's a really important role here for governments to create this enabling environment and to be mindful of the extent to which it is possible to create that enabling environment and still it doesn't quite flourish. And so, very much around making sure that we've got fluent dialogue between the public and the private sectors, that we are actually listening to one another and we understand what it is that investors and mining companies of all sizes are looking for to enable them to make those long-term decisions about establishing or expanding mining activities. But also that we've got people within government who understand business and therefore appreciate what some of the unintended consequences might be of legislation that comes through, frankly, of just changing the goalposts. And we know it particularly in the mining sector, because of its long-term nature and because of the high intensity capital requirements, actually just that consistency and transparency is so important. I think as well that there's a really important point here around making sure that we all have the same sort of standards and expectations, that we understand finance, not just in a case of how does a mid-sized company or a large company, small company raise money, and talk to Hubert and his team around that, but actually how do we establish these contracts and in the right way so that they are beneficial to all parties, so that we're creating a positive force for economic growth, for job creation, for environmental protections, and that's not sort of inevitable, actually. So I think it is really important that we continue to work together, to talk to one another, to bring experts on both sides together, to listen, to create and shape, drive, and implement the right kind of framing policies that will really enable the continued growth of mining across Africa.
Thank you very much. Hubert, one of the headwinds that faces mining, and for that matter, all the extractives, is the subject of excessive carbon footprint. And some of the solutions that have been put on the table is that if we digitize mining and move away from some of the more conventional ways of accessing the resource and reduce our carbon footprint, that might be the answer. And I wanted to just get your sense of what are the capital markets thinking about this? Is this something that the capital markets are warming towards? Is this something that the equity markets are warming towards? Or are the markets more comfortable with the traditional way of mining?
Thank you very much, Sheila. I know that we've talked, we've heard from both the Minister and Emma on this subject. I think I would really just say it's important that we have a sort of technology-driven sensitivity and vision. But naturally, global mining, digital best practice and digitization and a reduced carbon footprint will certainly make a positive difference to investors. As you will appreciate, we're predominantly and rapidly transitioning to ESG as well as the SDG aligned, Sustainable Development Goals aligned led mandates. In wearing my other hat, I also chair the CFA New York's Global Asset Owners Council, and just during last month's World Bank annual meeting, we launched the first SDGs ESG asset owners framework, which now gives us an opportunity to actually be able to measure not just the alignment, but also the potential impact, because a lot of the focus to date has been absent of data. And whenever you talk about technology and artificial intelligence and all of these great tools, there needs to be that hospitable and incentivized and enabling environment to be able to generate and create that data. And we continue to talk about a concept which we are quite committed to on the continent, which is the fact that we see data as infrastructure, and the ability to work with our public sector partners to then be able to generate insights into that data, to be able to improve economic and trade and investment related performance is a very critical tool that we certainly need to harness. But again, as I talk about, when we talk about carbon footprints, ESG, SDGs, we also need to be a little bit careful about how we approach that, because, I think Emma mentioned the British government hosted the UK Africa Investment Summit. I was there at her kind invitation. Thank you very much, Emma. And the Prime Minister made an interesting point. He said that he heard about other summits taking place, and he used an old Ghanaian saying, I'm from Ghana, talking about, we may have 5 fingers, but they're not all the same. And, we're living in, and you mentioned earlier about this globalization concept of, acting globally, but think locally or implement locally. And this transition is very different in Africa as it is for the rest of the world. So we caution investors as they focus on mitigating and minimizing the negative social impacts and fallouts of the transition. It should be very clear that we take an extra special look at the social impact of a transition, because of the fact that, we are very resource and mining sector dependent, but yet if we're not careful, everything is going to become a sort of sunset industry as opposed to a sunrise industry. So we therefore call for African mining investors to be at the forefront of the just transition and stranded assets agenda. And there's a lot of great work that's been led by the UNPRI in this respect. And it comes to the next point about when you talk about technology generally and the role of the continent. And we all know that it's well recorded that, sadly, the continent has missed past industrial revolutions, and it's imperative that we pursue a mining-driven fourth industrial revolution and the vision. And we strongly believe that vision should underscore Africa's, as just one example, Africa's golden opportunity with the gold-backed central bank digital currency market. I mean, we're witnessing, and it's reconfirmed each and every pandemic, that gold markets remain one of the most liquid in the world. And the innovation in blockchain technology is now accelerating and changing the way in which the world sort of looks at processing and investing in gold. Banks have been purchasing gold in recent years more so than ever before. I think in the past first quarter of 2019, central banks have purchased a combined total of about 145.5 tons of gold, which is an accumulation not seen by the World Gold Council since 2013. I mean, geopolitics and sort of global economics tells us that 75% of the US foreign reserves are held in gold. China's central bank is estimated to have increased its gold resources to 651.5 tons to its total global gold reserves, which stands at approximately 1,852 tons. We also know that the Central Bank of Russia is reported to hold as much as 2,113 tons of gold, with the value approaching 500 billion, and that China will soon roll out its gold-backed digital currency, while other countries have also already put out their gold-backed currency. And we've seen the EU, the British government, and 66 central banks that were recently polled are likely to have central bank digital currencies in place by 2026. So we think that it's important for the continent to develop and protect our gold reserves as the world looks to increase its gold resources. Gold-backed central bank digital currencies offer a viable and valuable alternative to fiat currency, which in the context of the African continental free trade area will accelerate intra-African trade by avoiding exchange rate loss and the volatility of currencies. So our contention is simply that given this global trend, as a continent, we must ensure that African gold remains as much as it can and should on the continent to back African central bank digital currencies, creating and resulting in mining investment flows, jobs, domestic listings for African and global mining companies, as well as global investment opportunities in the continent itself. And then just finally, there's an entire industry that is linked into this central bank digital currency and fourth industrial revolution agenda that is underpinned in one form or another by African minerals and resources. So we think that should actually form an important part of our COVID-19 economic stimulus in terms of the way that the mining sector can play a leadership role. And that sort of dovetails back into the point I was talking about, that forward-looking partnership. And I think we should have a great sense of urgency. It is not so much what's the business of business or what's the business of government. It's about what is the opportunity and how can we equitably work together to unlock that value for civil society and play our role as good global investors and economic citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I imagine Emma listening that to Hubert there, that if you had any doubt, you're welcome to invest in Africa. He's all but dealt with it, because he's firm that the way forward is through partnerships. But he